"Sir, my mom has a scar just like yours." The little boy said it so simply, standing in the cold morning light, tugging at the Alpha's sleeve as if he hadn't just shattered the world with one sentence. The Alpha froze. Not a muscle moved, but the air around him tightened, like the forest itself was waiting for his reaction. Because that scar wasn't a wound. It wasn't even a mark of war. It was something far rarer, something only two bound souls ever shared. And the woman the boy was talking about? She wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The Alpha had mourned her, buried her memory, built an empire on top of the grief she left behind. So how could her child be standing here? Why did the boy have the Alpha's eyes, and that impossible scar? And if the mother is alive, why has she been hiding from him all this time? The Alpha takes one slow breath, and everything begins to unravel. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Remembered. The morning assembly was supposed to be routine. Fenris stood at the head of the hall, arms crossed, listening to Elder Rorik drone on about border patrol schedules and livestock counts. The kind of tedious pack business that required an Alpha's presence, but not his full attention. His mind was already 3 conversations ahead. Trade agreements with the Ashford territory, the rogue sightings near the Eastern Ridge, the persistent headache that was his council's insistence he take a mate. Again, the hall smelled like wet stone and old wood, the scent of wolves packed too close together in a space built for ceremony rather than comfort. Sunlight cut through the high windows in pale, dusty shafts, illuminating the faces of pack members who looked anywhere but at him. They never looked directly at him anymore. Not since he'd stopped pretending the coldness was temporary. He was fine with that. Then the doors at the back of the hall creaked open. A small figure slipped inside. A child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, dark hair falling into eyes that were too large for his face. He moved with the unsteady confidence of someone who didn't yet understand fear, weaving between the legs of adults who glanced down in surprise but didn't stop him. Fenris noticed the boy immediately. Not because of the interruption. Children wandered into pack meetings sometimes, looking for parents or simply bored, but because of the way the boy moved. Deliberate, purposeful, heading straight toward the front of the hall. Straight toward him. The elder's voice faltered. A ripple of awareness spread through the room, heads turning, whispers starting and stopping like uncertain wind. The boy kept walking, his small shoes scuffing against stone, until he stood directly in front of Fenris. The Alpha looked down. The boy looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hall had gone completely silent now, the kind of silence that made every breath audible, every heartbeat a drum. Fenris studied the child's face, the sharp line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself despite being dwarfed by everyone around him. And those eyes. Gray-blue like winter ice over deep water. The exact shade Fenris saw every time he looked in a mirror. "Sir," the boy said, his voice clear and bright in the heavy quiet. He reached out, small fingers wrapping around the edge of Fenris's sleeve. "My mom has a scar just like yours." The words landed like stones in still water. Fenris didn't move, didn't breathe. The world narrowed to the space between him and this child, everything else falling away. The hall, the pack, the sunlight slanting through dust. His pulse, usually steady as a war drum, stuttered once before resuming its rhythm too fast, too hard. A scar like his. No, not possible. What did you say? His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraping against his throat like gravel. The boy didn't flinch. "The scar on your neck," he said, pointing at the mark just below Fenris's jawline, half hidden by his collar. "My mom has one exactly the same. Same place and everything. She said it means something special, but she won't tell me what." Fenris's hand moved before he could stop it, fingers brushing the old wound. It was barely visible anymore, a thin silvered line that most people never noticed. But he felt it every day. Felt the absence of what it represented. The bond mark. The one that appeared when 2 fated mates claimed each other. A physical manifestation of a soul-deep connection that transcended pack law, reason, and time itself. Only 2 people in the entire world would ever bear matching marks. The pair bound by fate. His had appeared 6 years ago. And then the woman who'd given it to him had vanished the same night, leaving nothing but blood, chaos, and a grief that had calcified into something harder than bone. Your mother, Fenris said slowly, his voice dropping into the register that made grown wolves take a step back. What's her name? The boy tilted his head, considering the question with a seriousness that seemed wrong on someone so young. She doesn't like it when people ask about her. Says we're supposed to stay quiet. He paused, chewing his lower lip. But you seem nice. And you have the scar. So maybe it's okay. Her name, Fenris repeated, each word deliberate. Laurentia. But I call her Mama. The floor dropped out from under him. Not the physical floor, that remained solid stone, unchanged. But something inside Fenris gave way. A foundation he'd built over 6 years of grief and rage and forced numbness cracking down the middle. He heard the sound of it breaking, felt the shock reverberate through his chest. Laurentia. She was alive. The boy, Quan, he'd said his name was Quan, was still talking, his small face animated with the kind of earnestness only children possessed. She works at the bakery on the south side, the one with the blue door. She makes really good bread. Sometimes she lets me help knead the dough, but I always punch it too hard and she laughs and… Where is she now? Fenris interrupted, his voice sharper than he meant it to be. Around them, the pack members were backing away, creating a circle of empty space. They could feel it, the sudden surge of alpha authority pouring off him in waves, thick enough to choke on. Quan blinked. At home, I think. She was still sleeping when I left. She's always really tired in the mornings. Sleeping. She was sleeping while her son wandered into the Alpha's hall and announced her existence to the one person she'd apparently been hiding from for 6 years. Fenris forced himself to breathe, to think past the roaring in his ears, the way his wolf was clawing at the inside of his chest, desperate to bolt from this hall and tear through the territory until he found her. Until he understood what the hell had happened to make her leave. To make her hide there. His eyes dropped to Quan again, really looking this time. The shape of his face. The set of his jaw. The way he stood, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, like he was ready to run or fight despite being barely tall enough to reach Fenris's waist. The gray-blue eyes that matched his own. How old are you? The question came out hoarse. 5 3/4, Quan said proudly. My birthday was last month. Mama made me a cake with honey frosting. 5 years old. The timeline fit. Perfectly, horrifyingly fit. Fenris's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the nearest table hard enough that the wood groaned in protest. He needed the anchor. Needed something solid to hold onto while his entire understanding of the last 6 years rearranged itself into a picture that made his chest feel like it was caving in. She'd been pregnant. Laurentia had been pregnant when she disappeared, and she'd never told him. Had never come back. Had raised their son alone in hiding while he'd… What? Mourned? Moved on? No, he hadn't moved on. He'd buried himself in pack business, in expansion and politics, and the endless grinding machinery of being alpha. He'd let people think he was heartless because it was easier than explaining that his heart had been ripped out and taken with her when she left. You look angry, Quan observed, his head tilting to the side. Are you mad at me? The question snapped Fenris back to the present. He looked down at the boy, his son, God's his son, and forced his expression into something less volatile. No, I'm not angry at you. At Mama. That was a more complicated question. Fury simmered beneath his skin, white-hot and demanding answers. But underneath that was something else, something that felt too much like the desperate relief of a drowning man breaking the surface. She was alive. I need to speak with your mother, Fenris said carefully. Do you know the way back to your home? Quan nodded. Of course. I'm not a baby. Then you're going to show me. The boy's eyes widened. Right now. Right now. A murmur rippled through the watching pack members. Elder Rorik stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. Alpha, perhaps we should. Cancel the rest of the assembly. Fenris cut him off. We're done here. But the border reports. Done. The word carried enough force to make Rorik's jaw snap shut. Fenris's gaze swept the hall, landing on each face long enough to make his point clear. Everyone out. Council will reconvene tomorrow. They moved quickly after that, filing toward the exits in a rush of footsteps and hushed voices. Speculation would be running wild within the hour. The Alpha leaving mid-assembly, following a strange child, looking like the world had just tilted sideways under his feet. Let them talk. He'd deal with that later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the woman who'd been living in his territory for gods knew how long, hiding herself and their son while he'd walked past her 100 times without knowing. Quan tugged on his sleeve again. We should go before Mama wakes up. She doesn't like surprises. Too bad. Fenris followed the boy out of the hall and into the pale morning light. The air was crisp with the bite of early autumn, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The territory sprawled around them, a mix of old forest and newer construction, houses and shops clustered together in organized chaos. Somewhere in this place, Laurentia was waking up, and she had no idea that her carefully hidden life was about to end. Quan led him through winding streets, chattering the entire way about nothing and everything. The stray cat he'd named Whiskers, the tree he'd climbed last week that made his mother scold him for an hour, the way the baker down the street always slipped him an extra pastry when Laurentia wasn't looking. Normal childhood things. The kind of life Fenris should have been part of. They turned down a narrow lane lined with modest houses, their wooden siding weathered but well-maintained. Flowers grew in window boxes, their petals bright against the gray wood. It was the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's names, where children played in the street until dusk. The kind of place someone would choose if they wanted to disappear into ordinary life. That one, Quan said, pointing at a house near the end of the lane. Blue shutters, a small porch, a garden out front that looked lovingly tended despite the season. Fenris stopped walking. For 6 years he'd imagined this moment. Dreamed of it, raged about it, grieved over the impossibility of it. He'd pictured finding her in 1,000 different scenarios, held captive, murdered, stolen away by enemies, living happy and oblivious in some distant territory. He'd never imagined this. Her, close enough that he could have walked past her home on any given day. Living quietly, raising their son, baking bread and tending gardens while he tore himself apart trying to understand why she'd left. Are you coming? Quan had already reached the front door, his hand on the knob. Fenris made himself move. Each step felt weighted, like walking through deep water. His senses sharpened to painful clarity. Every sound amplified, every scent distinct. He could smell lavender from the garden, bread from inside the house, and underneath it all, faint but unmistakable. Her. The scent he'd memorized in a single night 6 years ago, the one that had haunted him ever since. Honey and wood smoke and something uniquely Laurentia, the smell of home and mate and everything he'd lost. It was stronger now. Real. So close he could almost taste it. Quan pushed the door open. Mama? I'm back. No answer. The boy kicked off his shoes and disappeared into the house with the casual ease of someone who belonged there. Fenris stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, looking into the dim interior. It was simple inside. Clean. A small living space with worn furniture and books stacked on every available surface. Drawings covered one wall, childish scribbles of trees and animals, hung with obvious pride. A blanket draped over the back of a couch, the fabric soft and faded from use. Evidence of a life being lived. A quiet, careful life. She's still asleep, Quan announced, reappearing from a hallway. She had a late shift last night. We should probably. I'll wait, Fenris said. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The house was smaller than his quarters in the main lodge, smaller than anywhere he'd lived since becoming Alpha. But it didn't feel cramped. It felt lived in. Loved. The kind of space that wrapped around you like a warm embrace. He hated it. Hated that she'd built this without him. Hated that every corner of this place held memories he wasn't part of. Hated the evidence of her absence from his life, made tangible in throw pillows and picture frames, and the small shoes lined up neatly by the door. Do you want some water? Quan asked, already heading toward the kitchen. Mama says we should always offer guests something to drink. No. Fenris moved deeper into the room, his eyes cataloging everything. A calendar on the wall with bakery shifts marked in neat handwriting. A basket of mending in the corner, needle and thread waiting. A child's toy, a carved wooden wolf, sitting on the coffee table. A wooden wolf. His hands curled into fists. Quan. A voice called from the hallway, sleep-rough and achingly familiar. Did you go outside again? I told you not to wander off without. She appeared in the doorway and stopped dead. Fenris turned. For a handful of seconds, neither of them moved. The world held its breath, waiting. She looked different. Thinner than he remembered, her face sharper, her dark hair longer and pulled into a messy braid over one shoulder. She wore simple clothes, soft pants and an oversized shirt that hung off one shoulder. No makeup, no armor. Just her caught in the morning light streaming through the window, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to pure, undiluted terror in the space of a heartbeat. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers pressing against the scar just below her jaw. The matching scar. "Hello, Laurentia," Fenris said softly. She swayed on her feet. For a moment he thought she might faint, might collapse right there in her own hallway. But she caught herself, one hand bracing against the wall, her chest rising and falling too fast. "You can't be here," she whispered. "You can't, this isn't." "But I am here." He took a step toward her. She flinched back. The motion sent a spike of something hot and painful through his chest. "And you're going to tell me why you left? Why you've been hiding? Why I didn't know I had a son?" Her eyes darted to Quan, who was watching both of them with growing confusion. "Baby, go to your room." "But, now." The command in her voice surprised him. It was firm, authoritative, nothing like the soft-spoken woman he remembered from 6 years ago. Quan's lower lip jutted out, but he obeyed, trudging down the hallway with one last curious glance over his shoulder. The moment he was gone, Laurentia sagged against the wall. "You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have lied to me for 6 years." "Lied?" She laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "I didn't lie. I disappeared. There's a difference. Not to me. Of course not to you. Nothing ever matters except what you feel, what you want. I thought you were dead." The words exploded out of him, sharp enough to cut. "I searched for months. I tore apart 3 territories looking for any sign of what happened to you. He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "You just left. No word. No explanation. You were bleeding the last time I saw you, and then you were gone and I thought." He couldn't finish. Couldn't voice the nightmares that had plagued him for years. Laurentia's expression cracked, something like guilt flickering across her face before she shut it down. "I know what you thought. That was the point. The point. The point was to make me believe you were dead. The point was to survive." She pushed away from the wall, her spine straightening. The fear was still there. He could smell it, sharp and acrid, but underneath it was steel. "And we did. Quan and I. We survived just fine without you." The words hit like a physical blow. Fenris stared at her, at this woman who wore her face but seemed like a stranger, and felt something dangerous rising in his chest. Not just anger. Not just hurt. Something deeper, something that had been festering for 6 years, and was now clawing its way to the surface. "Without me," he repeated slowly. "You survived without me. While I was what? While I was going insane trying to find you. While I was destroying myself wondering if I'd somehow failed you. You did fail me." Her voice was quiet now, deadly quiet. "The night I left, you failed me in every way that mattered." The accusation hung between them, heavy and poisonous. Fenris took another step forward. She didn't back away this time, just lifted her chin and met his gaze with those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for longer than he cared to admit. "Then tell me how," he said. "Tell me what I did that was so unforgivable you'd rather let me think you were dead than face me. Tell me why our son has been growing up without his father. Tell me. He's not your son." The words were a knife between his ribs. Laurentia's face was marble, her expression giving nothing away. "He's mine. Only mine. You don't get to walk in here after 6 years and claim him just because you share some DNA. DNA. Fenris's voice dropped to a growl. "He has my eyes. My face. He has the Bond scar, Laurentia. Don't tell me he's not mine when every cell in my body is screaming that he is." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you." She stopped abruptly, her teeth clicking together. "It doesn't matter. What's done is done. Before I what? Leave. No. Fenris." His name on her lips was a weapon, and a plea all at once. "Please. Just go. Pretend you never saw us. We've been fine all this time. We don't need." "You've been starving yourself to feed him," he interrupted, his eyes dropping to the sharp angles of her collarbone, the way her clothes hung loose. "You've been working yourself to exhaustion to keep a roof over his head. You've been hiding in the shadows of my territory, afraid of being found. That's not fine. That's not even close to fine." Her jaw clenched. "We're surviving. Surviving isn't living. It's enough. It's not enough for me. The admission surprised both of them. Laurentia's eyes widened slightly, her breath catching. Fenris stood there, hands still fisted at his sides, and realized he was trembling. Actually trembling. Like some untested wolf facing his first real fight. "I don't care what happened 6 years ago," he said, the words coming faster now, spilling out before he could stop them. "I don't care what I did or didn't do, what you think I failed at. You can hate me. You can rage at me. You can make me bleed for it. But you don't get to keep my son from me. You don't get to hide anymore. You can't force me. I'm not forcing anything." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, the faint smattering of freckles across her nose that he'd forgotten about. "I'm asking. I'm begging if that's what it takes. Let me in. Let me understand. Let you what? Fix it." She laughed again, that same broken sound. "There's nothing to fix, Fenris. What we had died a long time ago." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingers against the scar on her neck. She gasped, her whole body going rigid. The bond flared to life between them, sudden and overwhelming. Not the gentle warmth he remembered from before, but a wildfire, hot and desperate and starving after years of neglect. It roared through his veins, setting every nerve ending alight, and he knew. She felt it too from the way her eyes went wide, her pupils dilating. "It's not dead," he said roughly. "Whatever we had, it's still here. Still burning." Laurentia's hand came up, wrapping around his wrist. Not to pull him away. Just to hold on, her fingers trembling against his skin. "That's the problem," she whispered. "It never stopped. And that's why you need to leave. That's why why we can't." A door opened down the hallway. They sprang apart like scalded animals. Quan appeared, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one ear, his face scrunched in thought. "Are you guys done fighting? Because I'm hungry and Mama usually makes breakfast by now." The domesticity of the question was absurd. Here they stood, the bond crackling between them like lightning, 6 years of pain and longing and unanswered questions filling the air, and their son wanted breakfast. Laurentia recovered first, smoothing her hands down her shirt and pasting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, baby. Go wash your hands. I'll start cooking." Quan looked between them, his young face far too knowing, before nodding and disappearing again. The moment he was gone, Laurentia turned back to Fenris. "You need to go." "No, Fenris. I'm having breakfast with my son." He moved toward the kitchen, not waiting for permission. "And then you and I are going to sit down and have a very long conversation about what happens next." He heard her sharp intake of breath behind him, smelled the spike of fear and fury. But she didn't try to stop him, didn't order him out. And that was answer enough. For now. Chapter 2. The Truth Beneath the Scar. The kitchen was smaller than Fenris expected. Barely room for 2 people to move without brushing against each other, let alone 3. But Laurentia navigated it with practiced ease, pulling ingredients from cupboards that looked like they'd been organized and reorganized 100 times. Eggs, bread, butter that she kept in a ceramic dish by the window. Fenris stood in the doorway watching. He didn't trust himself to move closer. Not yet. Not while the bond was still thrumming under his skin, making his fingers itch to reach for her, to pull her close and never let go. The years apart hadn't dulled it. If anything, the separation had sharpened it into something almost painful, like a blade that had been waiting to cut. Quan climbed onto a chair at the small table, swinging his legs. His rabbit sat propped beside him, its button eyes staring at nothing. "Mama makes the best scrambled eggs," he announced. "She puts cheese in them. And sometimes little pieces of ham if we have any." "We don't have any today," Laurentia said quietly, her back to both of them. Her shoulders were rigid, her movements too controlled. Like she was made of glass and one wrong move would shatter her. Fenris wanted to say something. Wanted to bridge the impossible distance between the doorway and the stove, between 6 years ago and now. But the words stuck in his throat, foreign and useless. What did you say to someone who'd disappeared from your life like smoke? Someone who'd taken a piece of you with them and never looked back? The eggs hit the pan with a soft sizzle. Laurentia stirred them methodically, her focus entirely on the task. She'd always been like that, he remembered suddenly. When things got overwhelming, she'd find something to do with her hands. Cooking, cleaning, organizing. Anything to keep moving, to avoid standing still long enough for the feelings to catch up. Are you my dad? The question came from Quan, direct and curious, his gray-blue eyes locked on Fenris. The wooden spoon in Laurentia's hand clattered against the pan. She didn't turn around, but her spine went even straighter, if that was possible. Fenris stepped into the kitchen properly, pulling out the chair across from Quan and sitting down. The table wobbled slightly under his weight. He kept his gaze on the boy, his son, and tried to figure out how to answer a question that should have been simple but felt like navigating a minefield. Yes, he said finally. Quan's eyebrows shot up. Really? Really? But Mama said my dad went away. That he couldn't be with us. Each word was a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples outward. Fenris glanced at Laurentia's back, at the way her shoulders had hunched slightly, like she was bracing for impact. Did she say why? Quan shrugged. She doesn't talk about it. She just gets sad when I ask, so I stopped asking. 5 years old, and already learning to protect his mother's feelings. Already carrying weight he shouldn't have to carry. Fenris's hands curled into fists under the table. I'm here now, he said carefully. And I'm not going away. Okay. Quan accepted this with the easy adaptability of childhood, already moving on to the next thing. Do you live in the big building? The one with all the tall windows? The main lodge? Yes. That's where the Alpha lives. Mama says he's really important, and we're supposed to stay away from there. He paused, his head tilting. But you have the scar. And Mama says the scar is special. Does that make you important too? Quan. Laurentia's voice cut through the conversation, sharp enough to make the boy jump. Enough questions. Set the table. He scrambled off the chair without argument, pulling plates from a lower cupboard with the ease of routine. Laurentia turned from the stove, carrying the pan of eggs, and for the first time since Fenris had sat down, their eyes met. Hers were defensive, angry, afraid. His must have shown too much because she looked away quickly, dividing the eggs onto 3 plates with mechanical precision. More on Quan's plate than her own. Barely anything on hers, actually. Just enough to not draw attention. Fenris's jaw clenched. They ate in silence. Or rather, Quan ate while chattering about everything and nothing. A story about the neighbor's dog, something funny that happened at the market, a question about whether rabbits really liked carrots or if that was just in stories. Laurentia pushed food around her plate, taking small bites when Quan looked her way. Fenris watched her instead of eating, cataloging every detail he'd missed in those first shocked moments. The way she held herself like she might need to run at any second. The faint circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. The calluses on her hands from hard work. The way she never quite relaxed, even in her own home, even with her son beside her. She'd been surviving. That's what she'd said. This wasn't surviving. This was barely holding on. I need to get ready for work, Laurentia said abruptly, standing up. Her plate was still half full. Quan helped clear the table. But Mama, it's your day off. You marked it on the calendar. Plans changed. She was already moving toward the hallway, her footsteps quick and light. Escaping. Fenris stood. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. There's 6 years to talk about. She spun on him then, and the look on her face made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't fear anymore. It was rage, pure and incandescent, barely leashed. You want to talk? Fine. We'll talk. But not here. Not in front of him. Quan had gone very still, his fork halfway to his mouth, watching them both with wide eyes. Fenris forced himself to breathe, to think past the instinct that was screaming at him to corner her, to demand answers, to make her understand that running wasn't an option anymore. When? Tonight. After he's asleep. She glanced at Quan, her expression softening slightly. Meet me at the old mill. 9 o'clock. Come alone. The old mill. The place where they'd first met 6 years ago, during a border dispute that had brought her pack and his into temporary alliance. The place where they'd talked for hours while their respective alphas negotiated, where something had sparked between them that neither of them had been looking for. Where everything had started. I'll be there, Fenris said. She nodded once, sharp and businesslike, then disappeared down the hallway. A door closed. Water started running. Fenris sank back into his chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been carrying him since Quan first spoke in the assembly hall was draining away, leaving him hollow. Are you really my dad? Quan asked again, his voice smaller this time. Fenris looked at him. At this child who had his eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, who sat in a kitchen that should have been familiar to Fenris, but wasn't, who'd grown up without him for reasons he still didn't understand. Yes, he said. I really am. Quan considered this, pushing eggs around his plate. Is that why Mama's upset? Your mother has a lot of reasons to be upset. Most of them are probably my fault. She cries sometimes at night, when she thinks I'm asleep. The confession hit harder than any accusation could have. Fenris closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady himself. I know. Are you going to make her cry more? I'm going to try very hard not to. Okay. Quan nodded, satisfied with this answer in the way only children could be satisfied with vague promises. Do you want to see my room? I have a collection of rocks. Mama says I can't bring home any more because we're running out of space, but I found a really cool one yesterday that looks like it has stars inside. Maybe later, Fenris interrupted gently. He needed to leave, needed space to think, to process, to figure out what the hell he was going to say to Laurentia tonight that wouldn't make everything worse. I have some things I need to take care of. Disappointment flickered across Quan's face, but he hid it quickly. Too quickly. Like he was used to people leaving, used to making himself small and undemanding. Fenris stood, then hesitated. Awkwardly, uncertain in a way he hadn't been since he was young, he reached out and ruffled Quan's hair. The boy's face lit up, a smile breaking through that was so bright it hurt to look at. I'll come back, Fenris promised. Tomorrow. We can look at your rocks then. Really? Really? He left before he could see Laurentia again, stepping out into the late morning air that felt too thin after the close warmth of the house. The street was busier now, pack members going about their daily routines. A few glanced his way, did double takes when they recognized him, then quickly found somewhere else to look. Word would spread. It probably already had. The alpha leaving the assembly to follow a strange child, disappearing into the residential district, emerging looking like he'd been gutted. Let them talk. Fenris walked without direction, his feet carrying him through familiar territory that suddenly felt alien. Every corner could hide her. Every face in the crowd could be someone she knew, someone who'd helped her stay hidden all this time. His own pack, and he'd been blind to what was happening right under his nose. He ended up at the main lodge without meaning to, climbing the steps to his private quarters. The space was too large, too empty, all polished wood and expensive furniture that had never felt like home. His office was worse, paperwork stacked on the desk, maps on the walls, everything organized and efficient and cold. He built this. Built an empire on top of grief. Convinced himself that duty and responsibility were enough to fill the hole Laurentia had left behind. Looking at it now, it just felt hollow. A knock on the door. Elder Rorik entered without waiting for permission, his weathered face creased with concern. Alpha, the pack is asking questions. Let them ask. They want to know about the boy. About why you left so suddenly. Rorik moved closer, his voice dropping. There are rumors already. That he's yours. That the mother is. A woman I thought was dead. Fenris didn't look up from the window he was staring through, didn't turn around. A woman who's been living in this territory for years while I tore myself apart looking for her. Silence. Then, the boy is yours? Yes. And the mother, she's your mate. The word tasted like ashes and honey all at once. My fated mate. The one who disappeared 6 years ago during the Blood Moon gathering. Rorik sucked in a sharp breath. But the investigation. The search. We found evidence of violence, of her wanting me to think she was dead, apparently. Fenris finally turned, meeting the elder's shocked gaze. I'm meeting with her tonight. Until then, no one approaches her. No one questions her. She's under my protection. Of course, Alpha. But the council will want answers. They'll want to know why she left, what happened. She doesn't know the council anything. She doesn't know anyone anything except me. The words came out harder than he intended, edged with possession and fury. And even that's debatable. Rorik studied him for a long moment. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. For the first time in 6 years, actually. She abandoned you. Abandoned the pack. That's not something you get to judge. Fenris's voice dropped into alpha command, making Rorik's spine straighten instinctively. Whatever happened between us is between us. The pack stays out of it. And if she refuses to stay? If she runs again? The question lodged in his chest like a splinter. Because that was the real fear, wasn't it? That tonight she'd disappear again, taking Quan with her, vanishing into the night and leaving him with nothing but more questions and the ghost of her scent. She won't run, Fenris said. He wasn't sure if he was trying to convince Rorik or himself. The hours until 9 o'clock crawled by like years. Fenris tried to work, tried to focus on the endless stream of pack business that demanded his attention. But every document blurred, every conversation slipped away, his mind circling back again and again to the image of Laurentia in that kitchen. The way she'd looked at him. The fear. The anger. The way the bond had flared between them like it had never been dormant at all. By the time the sun set, he was wound so tight he felt like he might shatter. He left the lodge as the last light faded from the sky, taking the path toward the old mill on foot rather than shifting. He needed the time to think, to prepare for a conversation that could go 1,000 different ways, most of them bad. The mill sat at the edge of the territory, ancient and unused, its water wheel frozen in place. Vines had overtaken most of the structure, nature slowly reclaiming what humans had built. It was quiet here. Private. The kind of place people came when they wanted to disappear for a while. Laurentia was already there when he arrived. She stood beside the wheel, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the dark water below. She'd changed clothes, wore jeans and a sweater now, her hair pulled back from her face. She looked fragile in the moonlight. Breakable. She looked like someone who'd been carrying the world alone for far too long. "You came," she said without turning around. "Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you wouldn't." She finally looked at him, and the exhaustion on her face made his chest ache. "This would be easier if you'd just let us go." "I can't do that." "I know." She laughed softly, bitterly. "I knew at the moment Quan came home smelling like you. I knew it was over. That the hiding was done." Fenris moved closer, careful not to crowd her. "Why were you hiding, Laurentia? What happened that night? What did I do that made you think disappearing was your only option?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "You really don't know, do you? You don't remember." "Remember what?" "The gathering. The ceremony. The moment we bonded." Her hand went to her scar again, fingers tracing the mark. "Do you remember what happened after?" He did. Of course he did. That night was burned into his memory. The feel of her skin, the taste of her mouth, the way the bond had snapped into place between them like destiny clicking home. They'd bonded under the blood moon, ancient and powerful and irreversible. And then, his memories got fuzzy after that. There'd been celebration. Drinking. His beta clapping him on the shoulder, congratulating him. The pack welcoming her, even though she was from another territory, because fated mates transcended pack law. And then nothing. He'd woken up the next morning alone, covered in blood that wasn't his, with no memory of how he'd gotten there, or where Laurentia had gone. "I remember waking up," he said slowly. "I remember you were gone. I remember blood. So much blood. And everyone telling me you'd disappeared in the night, that there'd been some kind of attack." "There was an attack," Laurentia interrupted. Her voice was flat now, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd told this story to themselves so many times it had lost all meaning. "On me. By your pack." The words didn't make sense. "What?" "Not all of them. Just 3. Your beta's brother and 2 of his friends. They found me alone after the bonding, after you'd passed out from too much celebration." Her arms tightened around herself. "They said I wasn't worthy, that I was an outsider, that I'd trapped you with the bond, that they were going to make sure I never officially became part of the pack." Ice spread through Fenris's veins. "No, that didn't happen. Someone would have told me. You would have. Told you." She turned to face him fully now, and there was something terrible in her eyes. "I tried to. I went to you the next morning, bloody and broken, and you looked at me like you didn't know who I was. You looked at me like I was a stranger, Fenris. And when I tried to explain what happened, your beta said I was lying. Said I was trying to cause division in the pack. Said the bond had clearly driven me insane. I would never have believed that. I would have. You were standing right there when he said it." Her voice cracked. "You were standing there and you didn't defend me. You didn't question it. You looked confused and tired, and you told me we'd talk about it later. That you needed to clear your head first. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The memories were there, just out of reach, swimming in alcohol-soaked fog. He remembered being hungover. Remembered feeling disoriented. Remembered. Gods! He remembered Laurentia standing in front of him, bruised and bleeding, and he'd thought she'd gotten into a fight with her old pack. Some kind of leaving ceremony gone wrong. He'd meant to ask about it later, after the pounding in his head stopped, after he could think straight. But later never came because she was gone. I waited for you, Laurentia continued, her words coming faster now like a dam breaking. I waited all day for you to come find me, to ask what really happened. But you didn't. And then your Beta's brother and his friends came back. Said they'd finish what they started. Said accidents happened all the time, especially to outsiders who didn't know their place. Laurentia. So I ran. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I ran because I was pregnant and terrified, and the man I'd bonded to, the man who was supposed to protect me above all others, had looked at me like I was the problem. Like I was the threat to his precious pack unity. Each word was a knife. Each confession opened a wound Fenris hadn't known existed. I searched for you, he said hoarsely. I tore apart 3 territories. You searched for a dead woman. I made sure of that. Left enough blood, enough evidence to make everyone think I'd been killed. Because that was safer than being found. Safer than coming back to a place where 3 wolves wanted me dead, and the Alpha didn't believe me. I would have believed you. If I'd known, if I'd understood. But you didn't. She wiped her face roughly. And by the time I realized I was pregnant, it was too late. I couldn't come back. Couldn't risk them finding out about Quan. So I hid. Changed my name, dyed my hair, stayed in the shadows of different territories until enough time had passed that I thought I could come back here. Because this was still your land, and the bond made me think. She laughed bitterly. It made me think that maybe, somehow, I'd be safer here than anywhere else. Stupid. Fenris wanted to argue. Wanted to defend himself, to explain that he didn't remember, that he'd been drugged or manipulated or... But the excuses died in his throat. Because she was right. He'd failed her. Utterly and completely failed her in the moment she'd needed him most. And all the searching afterward, all the grief and rage and guilt, didn't change that fundamental truth. The 3 wolves, he said, his voice coming out strangled. Who were they? Laurentia's eyes widened. It doesn't matter now. Their names. She stared at him for a long moment, something like fear flickering across her face. Then, quietly, Darius Corvin. Your Beta's younger brother. Matthias Wren. And Callum Shaw. 3 names. 3 wolves who would die screaming before the week was out. They're still in the pack, Fenris said. It wasn't a question. I don't know. I've been avoiding anyone who. They're still in the pack. He'd seen them. Recently. Darius had been at the assembly just this morning, standing near the back with his arms crossed. They've been living here. Safe. Protected. While you. He couldn't finish. Couldn't force words through the rage that was building in his chest like a storm. Fenris. Laurentia took a step toward him, then stopped. Don't do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not knowing sooner. Not protecting you when I should have. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw 6 years of pain and fear and loneliness etched into every line of her face. I can't fix what I broke. I can't give you back the time you lost. But I can make sure they never hurt anyone again. That won't change anything. It'll change everything. The bond flared between them again, hot and demanding. Laurentia gasped, her hand flying to her chest. They stood there in the moonlight beside the old mill, connected by something neither of them had asked for but couldn't escape. What happens now? She whispered. Fenris moved closer, slowly, giving her every chance to back away. She didn't. Now you stop hiding. You and Quan move into the lodge where I can protect you properly. And we figure out how to be a family, even if neither of us knows how. Your pack won't accept me. Not after. They'll accept you or they'll leave. Those are the only options. And if I say no, if I take Quan and run again, he should have told her she couldn't. Should have used alpha authority, should have commanded, should have made it clear that running wasn't an option. Instead, he said, then I'll let you go. Because I won't be the reason you're trapped somewhere you don't want to be. Not again. She stared at him, searching his face for something. Truth, maybe. Or the lie she expected. I need time, she said finally. To think. To figure out what's best for Quan. How much time? I don't know. A few days. Maybe a week. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse. To keep her close where he could see her, where she couldn't vanish again. But he forced himself to nod. 1 week. Then we talk again. About everything. Laurentia sagged slightly, relief mixing with exhaustion. Okay. 1 week. She turned to leave, but Fenris caught her hand. She froze. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I'm sorry. For failing you. For not seeing what was happening. For every moment you spent afraid when you should have felt safe. He raised her hand slowly, pressed it to the scar on his neck, the one that matched hers. I can't undo it. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Tears welled in her eyes again. She pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest like it burned. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness. Fenris stood alone beside the mill, the bond aching in his chest, and made himself a different promise. 3 wolves had hurt his mate, had threatened his unborn child, had forced Laurentia into 6 years of hiding in fear. By sunrise, they'd wish they'd never been born. Chapter 3, The Reckoning. Fenris didn't go back to the lodge. He went hunting. The night was cold, the kind of cold that sank into bones and made breath visible in the air. Most of the pack would be inside now, gathered around fires or tucked into warm beds, safe in the illusion that their world was stable and unchanging. That illusion was about to shatter. Fenris moved through the territory like a shadow, his senses hyper-aware. He wasn't searching randomly. He knew exactly where to find Darius Corvin. The beta's brother had always been predictable, a creature of habit who spent most evenings at the training grounds long after everyone else had left. Matthias and Callum would be harder to locate, but once he had one of them, the others would follow. The training grounds were empty when he arrived, just packed earth and weapons racks silhouetted against the moonlight. But the scent was fresh. Darius had been here within the hour. Fenris followed the trail to a small equipment shed on the far side of the grounds. Light leaked through cracks in the wooden walls. Voices inside, low and casual. Laughing about something. His hand closed around the door handle. For a moment he paused, giving himself one last chance to turn back. To handle this through proper channels, through pack law and council meetings, and the civilized procedures he'd built his leadership on. Then he remembered Laurentia's face when she'd described what they'd done to her. The fear in her voice. The way she'd looked at him like he was the monster. He ripped the door off its hinges. The sound of splintering would cut through the night. Inside, 3 wolves sprang to their feet, shock registering on their faces. Darius. Matthias. Callum. All 3 of them, together, like fate had decided to make this easier. Alpha. Darius recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion. What's? Fenris crossed the space between them in a heartbeat, his hand closing around Darius's throat and slamming him back against the wall hard enough to crack the wood. 6 years ago. The night of the blood moon gathering. Tell me what you did. Darius's eyes went wide, his hands scrabbling at Fenris's wrist. I don't know what you're. Don't lie to me. The words came out as a growl, his wolf rising to the surface. I know what happened. I know what you did to her. I want to hear you say it. Matthias and Callum had backed toward the door, their faces pale. They were young wolves, barely out of their teens when it had happened. Still young now, in their mid-20s, strong enough to be dangerous but not experienced enough to hide their guilt. Alpha, please, Matthias started. Stay where you are. Fenris didn't take his eyes off Darius. If either of you move, I'll rip his throat out before you reach the door. They froze. Darius was struggling now, his face turning red, feet kicking uselessly. Fenris loosened his grip just enough to let him breathe, to let him speak. It was a mistake, Darius gasped out. We were drunk, we didn't think. You didn't think what? That attacking my mate would have consequences? That I'd eventually find out? Fenris leaned closer, his voice dropping to something deadly. Or did you think I wouldn't care because she was an outsider? She was trying to trap you. The words exploded out of Darius, desperate and angry. The bond happened too fast. She showed up out of nowhere, and suddenly you're mated to someone we didn't know. Someone who could have been a plant from another pack. We were protecting you. Fenris's fist connected with Darius's jaw before he could finish. The crack of bone echoed through the shed. Darius's head snapped to the side, blood spraying from his mouth. "Protecting me," Fenris repeated flatly. He released Darius's throat, letting him collapse to the floor. By attacking a pregnant woman. By threatening to kill her. By driving her away and making her believe I'd abandoned her. He turned to face the other two. "That's what you call protection?" Callum was shaking, his face ashen. "We didn't know she was pregnant. I swear, Alpha, we didn't. You knew she was my mate. You knew she was under my protection. That should have been enough. Your brother approved it." Darius spat from the floor, blood dripping from his mouth. "Your beta said she was dangerous. Said she needed to be taught her place before she could be accepted into the pack. He gave us permission." The world tilted. Fenris stood very still, processing the words. His beta. Kale. The wolf who'd been at his side for over a decade, who'd helped him build this pack into what it was, who'd stood beside him at the Blood Moon gathering and congratulated him on finding his mate. Kale had ordered the attack. "He's lying," Fenris said, but his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Am I?" Darius pushed himself upright, leaning against the wall. His jaw was already swelling, misshapen. "Ask him yourself. Ask your precious beta what he thought about some nobody from a failing pack trapping you with a bond. Ask him what he said about keeping the bloodline pure. The bloodline. Gods." Kale had always been vocal about that, about maintaining strength through careful selection of mates. Fenris had ignored it, written it off as old-fashioned thinking that would die out eventually. He'd never thought. No, he couldn't think about that now. Couldn't process the implications of his second-in-command orchestrating an attack on his mate. If he started down that path, he'd lose what little control he had left. "Alpha." Matthias's voice was quiet, careful. "What are you going to do?" "Good question. By pack law, attacking another pack member was grounds for exile. Attacking a mated pair was grounds for execution. But Laurentia hadn't been an official member when it happened, had technically still belonged to her birth pack until the formal acceptance ceremony. A ceremony that never happened because they'd driven her away first. The law was muddy. Gray areas that could be argued either way depending on who was interpreting them. But Fenris didn't care about legal technicalities anymore. "You have until sunrise to leave pack lands," he said. His voice was calm now, almost conversational. That made it worse somehow. "If I see any of you after that, if I catch even a whisper of your scent, I'll hunt you down and finish what I should have done 6 years ago." "You're exiling us?" Darius's voice rose in disbelief. "For protecting the pack from. You're alive. That's more mercy than you deserve." Fenris turned toward the door, then stopped. "And if I ever hear that you've hurt anyone else, anywhere, I'll make sure every alpha in the region knows what you are. You'll be rogues. Packless. Hunted." He left them there, stepping out into the cold night air that suddenly didn't feel cold enough. His hands were shaking. Not from anger anymore. From something worse. From the creeping realization that this was bigger than 3 young wolves making a terrible mistake. His beta had orchestrated this. Kale had looked at Laurentia, at Fenris's fated mate, and decided she wasn't good enough. Had organized an attack designed to drive her away or kill her. And then, when she'd disappeared, when Fenris had been tearing himself apart searching for her, Kale had stood beside him and helped look. Had offered comfort and support, and never once mentioned that he knew exactly what had happened to her. 6 years of lies. Fenris walked through the territory, his feet carrying him toward the lodge without conscious thought. Pack members who saw him coming scrambled out of the way, sensing the violence radiating off him. Smart. The lodge was quiet when he entered, most of the residents already asleep. His beta's quarters were on the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of past alphas. Fenris had walked this hall thousands of times. Never noticed how the painted eyes seemed to judge. He didn't knock. Kale was at his desk, working through paperwork by lamplight. He looked up when the door opened, a smile starting to form. It died when he saw Fenris's face. "Tell me it's not true," Fenris said. The smile disappeared entirely. Kale set down his pen carefully, his expression shifting into something neutral and watchful. "Tell you what's not true. That you ordered the attack on Laurentia." Silence. Heavy and damning. Kale stood slowly, his hands spreading in a placating gesture. "Fenris, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you decided my mate wasn't good enough. How you sent 3 wolves to terrorize her. How you helped me search for her knowing exactly where she'd gone and why." Fenris's voice was rising now, the control he'd been clinging to starting to slip. Explain that to me, Kale. Make me understand how my beta, my friend, could do something like that. She was wrong for you. Kale's voice was steady, reasonable. The voice of someone who believed absolutely in what they were saying. She came from a weak pack. No lineage, no connections, nothing to offer except a bond that could have been artificially induced. You can't fake a fated bond. You can if you know the right kind of magic. The right herbs during a blood moon. She wasn't a witch. She was a baker's daughter who happened to be at the gathering because her alpha needed extra numbers for the negotiations. Fenris moved closer, his hands clenched at his sides. She was innocent. She was mine. And you tried to kill her. I tried to protect you. Kale's composure cracked, anger bleeding through. You were 24 years old, barely settled into being alpha, and suddenly you're bonded to some nobody who could have been planted by rivals to weaken the pack. I did what needed to be done. Fenris hit him. Not a calculated strike like with Darius. This was pure rage, uncontrolled and brutal. His fist connected with Kale's cheek, snapping his head back. The beta stumbled, catching himself against the desk. She was pregnant, Fenris snarled. She was carrying my son and you drove her away. You made her think I'd abandoned her. You took 6 years of my life, 6 years of my son's life, and threw them away because you thought you knew better than fate. Kale touched his bleeding lip, staring at the blood on his fingers like he'd never seen it before. I was trying to give you options. Trying to save you from a mistake that would have weakened everything we built. Get out. Fenris. Get out of my territory. Out of my pack. You have until morning. Fenris's voice had gone flat again, emotionless. The anger was still there, but it had compressed into something cold and hard. Take whatever you can carry. Leave everything else. If I see you after sunrise, I'll kill you. Kale straightened, his face hardening. You're making a mistake. She's already poisoned you against the pack, against me. The only poison here came from you. Fenris turned toward the door. You have your orders. Beta. He left before Kale could respond, before the fury could surge back and make him do something he'd actually regret. 3 wolves exiled in one night. His beta, his friend, the wolf he'd trusted above all others except the mate he'd failed to protect. The pack would be in chaos by morning. Questions would be asked. Accusations thrown. The careful stability he'd spent years building would crack wide open. But Fenris found he didn't care. He should have burned it all down 6 years ago. Dawn found him at Laurentia's door again. He'd spent the night walking, thinking, trying to process everything that had unfolded. The territory felt different now. Smaller. Every familiar corner held the ghost of what he'd missed, of the signs he should have seen. He knocked softly, not wanting to wake Quan if the boy was still asleep. The door opened almost immediately. Laurentia stood there in pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders, dark circles under her eyes that said she hadn't slept either. You exiled them, she said. Not a question. Word traveled fast in a pack. Of course she'd already heard. Yes. All 3. All 4. He saw her confusion, explained. My beta was involved. He ordered the attack. Her face went pale. Kale? But he always seemed so. I know. Fenris's jaw clenched. I didn't know. I should have known, should have seen it, but I was blind. To all of it. They stood there in the doorway, the early morning light making everything look washed out and fragile. Somewhere in the house, Fenris could hear Quan's voice, singing something off-key. You didn't have to do that, Laurentia said quietly. Exile them, I mean. I told you what happened, but I didn't expect. They hurt you. They threatened our son. There's no world where that goes unpunished. But your beta. The pack must be. The pack will adjust. He met her eyes, held them. I'm not asking your permission anymore, Laurentia. I'm not waiting a week. You and Quan are moving to the lodge today. I'm assigning guards. You're going to be formally recognized as my mate and Luna, and anyone who has a problem with that can follow Kale into exile. She should have argued. Should have told him he was being reckless, that he was destroying everything for someone who'd been gone for 6 years. Should have reminded him that she wasn't sure she could trust him, that fear didn't disappear overnight, just because the threat was gone. Instead, she said, Okay. Fenris blinked. Okay. Okay. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking suddenly vulnerable. You're right. Hiding didn't work. Running didn't work. And Quan deserves, her voice caught. He deserves to know his father. To grow up without fear. If you're serious about protecting us, about making this work, then, okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to forgiveness. But it was a start. Fenris let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. I'll send people to help you pack. We can move everything today, get you settled. Not everything. Laurentia glanced back into the house. This place, it's been home for a long time. I'd like to keep it. Maybe come back sometimes when things get overwhelming. Of course. Whatever you need. She nodded, then hesitated. The pack won't accept me easily. Not after everything. They'll see me as a threat, someone who made their alpha exile his beta. Let me worry about the pack. Fenris. I failed you once because I listened to others instead of trusting what I felt. What the bond told me. He moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I won't make that mistake again. The pack will adjust or they'll leave. Those are the only options. She searched his face, looking for something. You've changed. You're harder than you were. 6 years of grief will do that. I'm sorry. The words were barely a whisper. For making you think I was dead. For not finding another way to. Don't apologize for surviving. He wanted to touch her, to pull her close and feel the reality of her presence. But he held back, giving her space. You did what you had to do. I understand that now. Quan appeared in the hallway behind her, his hair sticking up in every direction, the stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. Are we having breakfast? I'm hungry. The mundane question broke the tension. Laurentia laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Yes, baby. We're having breakfast. Is Dad staying? Quan asked, completely casual, like the word had already become natural to him. Fenris felt something crack open in his chest. Dad. Such a simple word. Such an impossible gift. If that's okay with you, he said. Quan shrugged, already losing interest. Sure. Can we have pancakes? We don't have pancake mix, Laurentia started, but Fenris interrupted. I'll go get some. And whatever else you need. He looked at her. Make a list. Anything you want, anything that will make the lodge feel more like home. I'll have it there by the time you arrive. She stared at him. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. For a moment he thought she might cry. But she just nodded, her expression complicated and impossible to read. Okay, I'll make a list. By midday the pack was in an uproar. Fenris stood in the main hall, facing down the assembled wolves who'd demanded an emergency meeting. Most of them looked shocked. Some angry. A few were calculating, already trying to figure out how this shift in power might benefit them. Elder Rorik stood at the front, his face grave. Alpha, the pack deserves an explanation. 4 exiles in one night, including your beta. These are unprecedented actions. The explanation is simple, Fenris interrupted. 6 years ago, my mate was attacked by members of this pack. The attack was orchestrated by my beta. She fled out of fear for her life and the life of our unborn child. She's been living in hiding ever since. He let the words sink in, watched the shock ripple through the crowd. The wolves responsible have been exiled. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to join them. Silence. Then chaos. Voices erupted, questions shouting over each other. How could they not have known? Why hadn't the Alpha said something sooner? Where was this mate now? What about pack security? Fenris let them rage for a moment, then released enough Alpha authority to make every wolf in the room shut their mouths and drop their eyes. My mate's name is Laurentia, he continued into the sudden quiet. She'll be formally recognized as Luna this week. Our son, Quan, will be acknowledged as my heir. They'll be under my personal protection, and anyone who threatens them in any way will answer to me directly. He paused. Are we clear? Murmurs of agreement. Not enthusiastic, but compliance was enough for now. A voice spoke up from the back. Alpha, if I may, what about the beta position? Kale's exile leaves us without second in command. Fenris hadn't thought that far ahead. The beta position was crucial. The wolf who stood between the Alpha and the pack, who handled the daily operations that kept everything running smoothly. Without one, the whole structure became unstable. I'll be taking applications, he said. In the meantime, Elder Rorik will assume temporary beta duties. Rorik's eyebrows shot up, but he nodded acceptance. The meeting dissolved after that, wolves breaking into small groups to gossip and speculate. Fenris caught fragments of conversation as he left. Debates about whether the mate was real or a convenient fiction, whether the exile was justified, whether their alpha had gone mad. Let them talk. As long as they didn't act against Laurentia, they could think whatever they wanted. He found her standing outside the lodge when he returned, Quan playing in the grass nearby. She looked small against the massive building, uncertain. "Your quarters are ready," Fenris said, coming to stand beside her. "Third floor, east wing. Private living space with rooms for you and Quan. I had them stock the kitchen with everything on your list." "Thank you." She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on Quan. "He's happy. I haven't seen him this happy in, maybe ever. He's home. This isn't his home. We've never lived here. It's where his father is. That makes it home." Fenris followed her gaze to their son, who was examining a beetle with intense fascination. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared. But I meant what I said. You're safe here. Both of you." Laurentia finally looked at him. "What if I can't do this? What if I can't be Luna, can't be what the pack needs? You don't have to be anything except yourself. That's all I need. All Quan needs. That's not how pack politics work. Then I'll change how pack politics work." She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "You can't just rebuild the world because we showed up. Watch me." And for the first time since he'd seen her again, Laurentia smiled. A real smile, small and fragile but genuine. It felt like the sun coming out after years of winter. Chapter 4. What the scar really meant. 3 weeks later, Laurentia stood in front of the mirror in her new quarters, trying to convince herself she could do this. The Luna ceremony was in 2 hours. 2 hours until she'd stand in front of the entire pack and be formally recognized as Fenris's mate, as their leader alongside him. 2 hours until there was no more hiding, no more pretending to be someone small and forgettable. Her hands shook as she tried to fasten the clasp of her necklace, a silver chain with a wolf pendant that Fenris had given her last week. It was simple, understated, nothing like the elaborate jewelry past Lunas had worn. But it felt heavy anyway, weighted with expectation. The door opened. She tensed, expecting Fenris, but it was Quan who bounded in, already dressed in the new clothes they'd bought him. Dark pants, a white shirt, a little vest that made him look impossibly grown up. "Mama, everyone's already downstairs." His face was flushed with excitement. "Dad said I get to stand with you during the ceremony. That I'm important too." "Dad." The word still made her chest ache every time he said it. Not with pain anymore, but with something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "You are important," she said, abandoning the necklace and crouching down to his level. "The most important person in the world. Dad says you're the most important person. Your dad says a lot of things. He talks about you all the time. To me, to the wolves who work for him, to everyone." Quan tilted his head, studying her with those too perceptive eyes. "He really likes you, Mama. Like really, really likes you." Laurentia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's more complicated than that, baby." "Why?" Good question. Why was she making this so complicated? Fenris had done everything she'd asked for and more. He'd exiled the wolves who hurt her. He'd given her and Quan a home. He'd been patient and careful, and hadn't pushed for more than she was ready to give. But the fear was still there. Buried deep, yes. Less sharp than it had been. But present. Whispering that this was temporary, that something would go wrong, that the safety she felt was an illusion that would shatter the moment she let herself fully believe in it. "Because grown-up feelings are always complicated," she said finally, pressing a kiss to Quan's forehead. "Now go find your father. Tell him I'll be down soon." Quan raced off, leaving her alone with the mirror and her racing thoughts. She managed the necklace clasp on the third try, then studied her reflection. The dress was deep blue, simple in cut but elegant. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the scar on her neck. She'd thought about covering it with makeup, with her hair, with anything that would make it less visible. But Fenris had asked her not to, had said the pack needed to see it, to understand what the bond mark meant. A knock at the door. This time it was him. Fenris entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. He wore ceremonial clothes, dark leather and silver embroidery, traditional alpha attire. His hair was pulled back, exposing his own scar. Matching hers. Proof of something neither of them had asked for, but couldn't escape. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look terrified." "That too." He moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "We don't have to do this today. If you need more time. I've had 6 years of time. More won't make this easier. She forced herself to breathe. I'm ready. Or as ready as I'll ever be. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, calloused and strong. The touch sent a jolt through the bond, that connection that had been growing stronger every day they spent in the same space. The pack won't make this easy, he said. Some of them still question whether you're really my mate. Others think you manipulated me somehow. There will be challenges. I know, and I'll stand with you through all of it. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to face them. To prove you belong here. He squeezed her hand. Can you do that? Could she? A month ago, the answer would have been no. She'd spent so long hiding, making herself invisible, that the thought of standing in front of hundreds of wolves and claiming her place seemed impossible. But then she thought of Quan, of the way he'd blossomed in these past weeks, making friends, exploring the territory without fear, laughing more than she'd ever heard him laugh. Of how he looked at Fenris with absolute trust and adoration, soaking up every moment with his father like he was storing them for a lifetime. She thought of the life she could give him here. The life he deserved. Not just surviving, but thriving. Yes, she said. I can do that. Fenris smiled, and it transformed his face from severe to something almost gentle. Then let's go make you a Luna. The ceremony hall was packed. Every member of the pack who could walk was there, crammed into the space shoulder to shoulder. The air smelled like anticipation and judgment, hundreds of eyes turning toward Laurentia as she entered with Fenris at her side and Quan's small hand clutched in hers. The walk to the front felt endless. Every step was measured, deliberate, her spine straight despite the urge to curl inward and disappear. She could feel their stares, hear the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. That's her? Doesn't look like much. Can't believe the alpha exiled Kale for her. Where's she been all this time? Fenris's hand found the small of her back, a subtle pressure that steadied her. Reminded her she wasn't alone in this. They reached the front where Elder Rorik waited, his weathered face neutral. He'd been civil to her in the weeks since she'd moved to the lodge, but she couldn't tell if he actually approved or was just following orders. We gathered today, Rorik's voice rang out, silencing the whispers, to witness the formal recognition of Laurentia as Luna of this pack, to acknowledge the bond between her and our alpha, and to welcome her son, Quan, as heir. More whispers. Louder now. Someone in the back actually laughed, quickly stifled. Rorik continued as if he hadn't heard. The bond mark is sacred. It appears only between fated mates, chosen by forces older than pack law. It cannot be faked, cannot be forced. Its presence is proof of a connection that transcends choice. He gestured to Laurentia. Show them. She hesitated, her free hand rising to touch the scar. Then, slowly, she pulled her hair fully away from her neck and tilted her head, so the mark was clearly visible. A ripple went through the crowd. Some leaned forward, straining to see. Others looked away, as if the sight of it made them uncomfortable. And the alpha, Rorik said. Fenris mirrored her motion, exposing his own scar. The two marks were identical, the same shape, the same placement, the same silvered tissue that caught the light. The whispers died completely. Because whatever doubts they'd had, whatever suspicions about manipulation or lies, the bond marks didn't lie. Couldn't lie. The bond was formed 6 years ago, Rorik continued, under a blood moon, witnessed by members of both packs. He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd. What followed was a betrayal of the worst kind. An attack on a mated wolf. A conspiracy to drive her from pack lands. You could have heard a pin drop. Those responsible have been exiled. Justice has been served. Rorik turned to Laurentia. But justice does not undo harm. Does not erase years of fear and isolation. The question before us now is this. Can we as a pack accept what was done in our name? Can we welcome back the mate who was driven away? Can we become worthy of the Luna we failed to protect? The words hit harder than Laurentia expected. She'd been braced for hostility, for challenges, for wolves demanding she prove herself. She hadn't expected this, the acknowledgement of collective failure, the admission that the pack bore responsibility for what happened to her. Laurentia, Rorik said, his voice gentler now. Do you accept the position of Luna? Do you swear to stand with this pack, to lead alongside your mate, to protect these wolves as they should have protected you? The question was formal, ceremonial. She was supposed to say yes, to accept gracefully and move forward. But standing there, looking out at hundreds of faces, some friendly, some hostile, most uncertain, Laurentia found herself saying something different. No! Shock rippled through the hall. Fenris's hand on her back tensed. Quan looked up at her, confused. Not yet, she continued, her voice steady now. Because I won't stand here and pretend the past doesn't matter. I won't accept empty words about justice and protection when most of you don't even know what happened to me. When most of you never bothered to ask why your alpha's mate disappeared. Fenris started to speak, but she shook her head, stopping him. This was hers to say. 6 years ago, I bonded with Fenris under a blood moon. It should have been the happiest night of my life. Her hand went to the scar again, fingers tracing the mark. Instead, it became the night 3 wolves decided I wasn't good enough. That I didn't belong. That I needed to be driven away or killed before I could contaminate your precious pack bloodlines. Murmurs now uncomfortable and shifting. People looking at their neighbors, wondering who had known and said nothing. They attacked me while I was alone. While my mate, your alpha, was passed out from celebration, his beta drugged him to make sure he wouldn't interfere. They told me I had no place here. That they'd finish the job if I didn't leave. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. So I left. And I hid. And I raised my son alone because I was too afraid to come back to a place where people wanted me dead. Silence. Heavy and suffocating. I'm not asking for your pity, Laurentia said. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what acceptance means. It's not just ceremony and pretty words. It's making sure nothing like this ever happens again. It's questioning when someone disappears instead of assuming. It's standing up when you see injustice instead of looking away. She looked directly at Fenris now. Your alpha did everything right. He exiled the wolves responsible. He gave me and Quan a home. He's trying to make amends for something that wasn't even his fault. She turned back to the pack. But I won't be your Luna if you're just following orders. If you're accepting me out of fear of him, rather than actual welcome. I'd rather go back to hiding than spend the rest of my life wondering which of you secretly wishes I'd stayed gone. The hall erupted. Voices shouting agreement, disagreement, confusion. Rorik looked stunned. Fenris looked like he was torn between pride and panic. Then someone stepped forward from the crowd. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, with scars running down her arms. My name is Vera, she said loudly, cutting through the noise. I was attacked by a packmate 3 years ago. I reported it to the beta, to Kale. He told me I was overreacting, that I should keep quiet to maintain pack unity. She looked at Laurentia, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I wish I'd had your courage. I wish I'd left instead of staying somewhere that didn't protect me. Another voice. An older man this time. I knew something was wrong the night of the blood moon. Saw Kale slipping something into the alpha's drink. Thought it was just a prank. I should have said something. More voices. More confessions. Wolves admitting they'd heard rumors, seen things, suspected something was off but hadn't acted. The guilt had been festering under the surface, waiting for permission to be released. Laurentia stood there, overwhelmed, as the pack unraveled its secrets in front of her. Fenris moved to her side, his hand finding hers again. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Yes, I did. They needed to hear it. I needed to say it. And now? She looked at the faces in front of her. Still uncertain, still complicated. But different somehow. More honest. Now we see if they mean it. The ceremony didn't continue that night. Too much had been said, too many wounds opened. Rorik called for a recess, suggesting they reconvene in a week after everyone had time to process. Laurentia expected backlash. Expected wolves to corner her, to accuse her of disrupting pack harmony, of making them look bad. Instead, something else happened. Over the next few days, wolves started approaching her. Quietly, tentatively. Some apologized for not questioning Kale's version of events. Others shared their own stories of being silenced or dismissed. A few just wanted to meet Quan, to welcome him properly now that they understood what his presence meant. Vera became a constant presence, bringing meals when Laurentia forgot to eat, offering to watch Quan when she needed space. Other young wolves followed her example, forming a loose circle of support that felt genuine rather than obligatory. The pack was changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing. Fenris watched it happen with something like wonder. You did in one speech what I couldn't do in 6 years, he said one evening as they sat on the balcony outside her quarters. Quan was asleep inside, exhausted from a day of playing with his new friends. You gave them permission to change by exiling Kale, Laurentia countered. I just gave them a reason. They were sitting closer than they used to. Not touching, but the space between them had shrunk gradually over the weeks. The bond hummed beneath her skin, patient and persistent. The ceremony is in 3 days, Fenris said. Rorik thinks the pack is ready now. But if you need more time... I don't need more time. She turned to face him properly. I need you to answer a question. Anything. That night. The blood moon. When we bonded. She took a breath. Do you regret it? Not knowing what would come after, but the bond itself. Do you wish it had been someone else? Someone stronger, better connected, more? No. The answer was immediate and absolute. Not for a single second. Even though I left, even though I kept Quan from you, even though... He shifted closer, his eyes intense. You survived, Laurentia. You kept our son safe when I failed to protect either of you. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing anyone could have done. I was scared. I'm still scared. I know. His hand came up slowly, cupping her cheek. She didn't pull away. But you're here anyway. That's what courage actually looks like. The bond flared between them, hot and demanding. It had been doing that more often lately, responding to proximity, to touch, to the simple fact that they were finally in the same space after years apart. Laurentia had been fighting it, keeping distance, sleeping in separate rooms, maintaining boundaries because she didn't trust herself to handle more. But sitting there in the moonlight with Fenris's hand on her face and 6 years of longing crystallizing into something real and present, she realized she was tired of fighting. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to be someone's mate. How to trust again. We figure it out together. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. No expectations. No pressure. Just one day at a time. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. What if I'm broken? What if I can't? You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. And maybe it was the moonlight, or the exhaustion of carrying fear for so long, or the simple fact that she was tired of being alone. Maybe it was just the bond, finally getting what it had wanted since the moment they'd met. Laurentia leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first. Tentative. A question rather than a demand. But then Fenris made a sound low in his throat, and his hand slid into her hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and setting fire to the world all at once. The bond sang. That was the only word for it. After years of aching and pulling and demanding attention, it finally relaxed into something warm and right and complete. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Laurentia laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. What? Fenris asked, his forehead resting against hers. I forgot how good that felt. Kissing you. We should do it more often then. We should do a lot of things more often. His eyes darkened. Laurentia. Not tonight, she said quickly. I'm not ready for that yet. But soon. Maybe. She paused. Probably. Whenever you're ready. No rush. They sat there together as the moon rose higher, talking quietly about nothing important. About Quan's progress in school, about pack politics, about the small mundane details of building a life together. It felt normal. Almost boring. It felt perfect. The ceremony 3 days later was different from the first attempt. The hall was just as packed, but the energy had shifted. Instead of judgment and suspicion, there was something closer to cautious hope. Wolves had dressed up, brought flowers, turned the event into something celebratory rather than combative. Quan stood beside Laurentia again, but this time he was vibrating with excitement rather than confusion. Fenris's hand was steady on her back as Rorik began the formal words. We gather today to witness. Actually, Laurentia interrupted. Rorik stopped, eyebrows raising. She smiled apologetically. I'd like to say something first. If that's okay. Rorik gestured for her to continue, stepping back. Laurentia looked out at the assembled pack. So many faces. Some she recognized now, others still strangers. But they were watching her with attention, with curiosity. With openness. Last week I said I wouldn't accept being Luna if you were just following orders, she began. I meant that. But I've spent the past few days talking to many of you. Hearing your stories. understanding that this pack isn't defined by the worst actions of a few wolves, but by what we choose to become moving forward. She reached down, taking Quan's hand. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning how to not be afraid all the time. I'm still figuring out how to be a mate, a mother, a leader. I'll make mistakes. I'll probably mess up spectacularly at some point. Scattered laughter. But I'm willing to try. To stand with you. To help build something better than what we had before. She looked at Fenris, then back at the pack. So yes, I accept. I accept being Luna. I accept being part of this pack. And I accept the responsibility of making sure no one else ever has to hide the way I did. The response wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. Wolves howling their approval, the sound building until it shook the rafters. Rorik completed the ceremony with tears in his eyes. The formal words about duty and honor and protection. The binding oath that tied her to the pack as permanently as the bond tied her to Fenris. And when it was done, when she was officially Luna, Fenris pulled her close and kissed her in front of everyone. Not hesitant or careful, but claiming, celebrating, announcing to the world that she was his, and he was hers, and nothing would separate them again. The pack roared their approval again. Quan tugged on Fenris's sleeve. Does this mean we're a real family now? Fenris crouched down, pulling their son into the embrace. We've always been a real family. Now everyone else just knows it too. Later that night, after the celebration feast, after Quan had been put to bed exhausted and happy, Laurentia stood on the balcony again, staring out at territory that was finally, truly hers. Fenris joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, letting herself relax in a way she hadn't been able to before. Any regrets? He asked. About becoming Luna? Surprisingly, no. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. About kissing you in front of the entire pack? A little. That was very public. We could practice in private. Make sure you're comfortable with it. That's a terrible line. It worked though. It had. She kissed him again, slower this time. Deeper. Letting herself feel the bond fully without fear tempering it. When they broke apart, Fenris was breathing hard. Laurentia, if we keep doing this, I'm not going to be able to stop. Who said I want you to stop? His eyes widened. You said you weren't ready. I said not that night. It's a different night now. She took his hand, pulling him toward the door to her quarters. Besides, we have 6 years to make up for. Might as well start now. Are you sure? She was. Terrifyingly, wonderfully sure. Yes. They barely made it inside before the careful control they'd both been maintaining shattered. The bond flared hot and demanding, years of separation and longing finally being answered. And in the morning, when Quan burst into the room demanding breakfast, he found both his parents together. His mother laughing, his father smiling, both of them looking happier than he'd ever seen them. Does this mean Dad's staying forever now? He asked. Laurentia met Fenris's eyes over their son's head. Saw the promise there. The certainty. Yes, she said. Forever. The scar on her neck tingled, warm and content. A mark that had meant loss and pain and fear for so long had finally become what it was always supposed to be. Proof of a bond that refused to break. Evidence of a love that survived everything meant to destroy it. A promise that they'd found their way home. Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed this story, tap like, hit subscribe, and don't stop here. There's another story waiting for you. Just click the video on your screen to keep going.